We welcome you to another edition of Snap the Pigskin. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I am back after my week-long hiatus. We've got a great show for you today. We're recording this on a Tuesday. It comes out on a Wednesday. I'm also very tired, so my brain is not firing on all cylinders. But hey, we're back here. And week 3 of the preseason is coming right around the corner. The NFL season almost officially going to start. I'm already starting in my fantasy football league draft at some point this week or next week. I know you're not a big fantasy football guy, Kedrick, but I am kind of one of the big fantasy football buffs.
I care as much about your fantasy football team as I do about your star side, Noah. Move it along.
But hey, how did last week go? I heard last week was a really good episode. Talked Bills, talked Cowboys.
It was great. It was great previewing the AFC East and the NFC East. A good friend of mine, Jack Goods, got to join for the AFC East preview. He used to cover the Buffalo Bills for the Buffalo News. So kind of the perfect stand-in host to join me for part of the show, while we also kind of speed ran through a little bit of items of news of the week and some of the love and hate that I have for the NFC East. The NFC East, probably the most hateable division in football year over year. So it was a good time. It was a good show. Really glad that Jack could join us because that was a really, really great preview segment with him who knows that division really well.
Mm-hmm. And you can find that episode on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/snapthepigskin. Give a like, give a subscribe. We're going to continue on with the NFC and the AFC division previews today. And we've got a good show coming up. Preseason games are coming up here as well. There also was a big trade that happened. Matthew Judon to the Atlanta Falcons from the New England Patriots. And a little bit of a story there. He was a bit disgruntled with the New England Patriots organization. He comes over from the Patriots to the Atlanta Falcons. His two choices were the Chicago Bears or the Atlanta Falcons. And for some Packers fans, this might be pretty exciting. He chose the Falcons over the Bears. He chose the Atlanta Falcons over the Chicago Bears. Just take that into account. Take that with a grain of salt. But the Falcons have been making some moves this past week. They got Matthew Judon on their roster. They also signed former All-Pro for the Denver Broncos, Justin Simmons, to their roster. So Atlanta now starting to make some moves, not only on the offensive side, what they've done this past season in free agency and the draft, but now they're starting to make moves on the defensive side. And this was a need that they needed to get, was a pass rusher. They get one in Matthew Judon, and they add some secondary help in Justin Simmons as well.
Yeah, the Judon trade is where I think Atlanta really made its money here. You only have to give up a third-round pick. Not a I guess that's a fringe premium pick, not a first rounder, but Atlanta's got to cash in here with the schedule you have this season, with the talent you have around you, bringing in a new quarterback. I think you have a chance to really make a push, and maybe by the time, week 8 comes around, we're talking about Atlanta as a surprise real contender for the NFC. Start pushing some chips in the middle here. I think it's a good move for Atlanta, capitalizing on a window of opportunity despite the overhaul in the regime there.
Yeah, and I think and at least for right now, gives the Atlanta front office some sort of a handling of, okay, we got to make some moves. We got to make this whole offseason look like it was a complete waste of offseason because they spent their first round pick on Michael Penix, to where now he's not even going to play the rest of this preseason. So it's kind of like they needed to do something. This maybe could be a splash. I think Matthew Judon, that's a very good move for Atlanta. I think also getting Justin Simmons to help that secondary as well could help the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, 28 sacks between the 21 and 22 seasons. That's great. Obviously getting a little bit older. He's 32. You have to wonder, is this Are you getting him on a steep decline here? If you're the Falcons, you hope that's not the case. But it's the risk, I guess, you decided you have to take for a guy who is coming off of a season-ending injury a year ago.
Yeah. And then on the other side of it, it's the Patriots as well, because New England, this has been an issue for the past few years now, where they've had players who have been superstar all-pro players that have came to this organization and have at the end of their tenure been kind of disgruntled. Now that has to do in part with the Bill Belichick kind of, thinking the Patriot way, but it also does leave that kind of question mark. Even with Gerard Mayo there, like they were having a lot of issues with Judon even before Gerard Mayo got there. So this was kind of a move, I think, for the Patriots that needed to happen, because if they keep him on that roster, he's just a cap casualty at this point. So they at least get him off their books, get him off their roster, and altogether just, move on to a new chapter. And hopefully he'll do well in Atlanta.
Yeah, I guess you just hope that you don't I was gonna say that, like, you hope you don't have a New York Jets situation on your hand here, where you trade for a guy who's in a contract dispute and then he doesn't want to play for you. I almost don't. I totally understand Matthew Judon being like, I haven't proven anything for Atlanta, so I'm not going to demand that they pay me. Makes you wonder if this was really about the money in New England, or was it about something else in the building? I don't know. Yeah, whatever. Best wishes to Matthew Judon down there in the NFC South.
Yep.
Our precious, precious ugly child.
The wonderful NFC South. Well, we'll not talk more about the NFC South today. We'll actually jump into the NFC West and the AFC West today. And there was a couple moves that, a lot of these teams all made, the NFC West and the AFC West. Some teams got head coaches. Some teams got new players. Some teams got new quarterbacks potentially. There's a lot to break down here. So for our listeners, Kedrick, here's how it goes. If you guys have listened to our show before, hey, we'll give you, you don't have to listen to the gist of this. But if you're new listeners, here's how it goes. So we break down these divisions from, AFC, NFC, each week up until the regular season. Me and Kedrick are going to take a little piece off of Sam Gemini, the Puckworms podcast, which feel free to give him a listen to. He's on Spotify and all those other stuff. And we're going to give one love and one hate to what we think about each of these teams. And then at the end of it, we're going to predict a division winner and our preseason division winner. Now, later on in the year, maybe we have a chance to change it up, or maybe we'll just continue on with our division winner and stick it out. So, Kedrick, let's get right into it. And let's jump to probably our least favorite team in the NFL, at least as Packer fans, our least favorite team to talk about, the San Francisco 49ers. This 49ers team is on the precipice of a potential downfall, a potential, landslide, an avalanche cascading, all the way down. Trent Williams has been wanting a contract extension. He has no more guaranteed money. Brandon Ayuk is in a contract dispute right now, trying to, the Niners are trying to get him to stay with the organization. He's trying to get out, but he also kind of wants back in. I mean, I don't know what's going on there, but that situation with Ayuk is crazy. But if you think about it, after a while, if you get those two back on the roster, this 49ers offense looks pretty scary, because they already have Deebo Samuel. You have Christian McCaffrey, who's coming off an electric season for this group. You have that 49ers offensive line, still one of the top offensive lines in the National Football League. You have a really good defense behind you as well. I don't want to give Brock Purdy the credit for this, but you look at this Niners team, if they get, and I say this, if they get Ayuk and Williams to come back, this team is very scary and could be a favorite to win the NFC once again.
Yeah, we'll dip in a little bit harder on what we hate for this team moving forward. But frankly, what's not to love on the roster? Like you mentioned, all of these guys. And look, Brock Purdy, if you wipe away kind of the big flashy plays from Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, and just strip it down to raw numbers in EPA per play, EPA per drop back, the way Brock Purdy was incredibly efficient when he had a clean pocket last year. He had an abnormal season, being just incredibly statistically anomalous as an efficient pocket passer last year. There is part of that where I expect him to regress some off of just the absurdly off the charts efficiency numbers that he had last season. So I think there will be a small regression there, which I think is bad if you're a 49ers fan hoping to win a Super Bowl because you had, just an absurd season from Brock Purdy a year ago, and you still could not beat the big bad man in Kansas City. But overall, this is still a really, really talented roster, both on the offensive side, on the defensive side of the ball. You still have Nick Bosa, you still have Fred Warner. You hope to get Dre Greenlaw back a little bit later. This is still a really good 49ers team. The core is still there. There's still a lot to love about this team.
Yeah, there's a lot to love. I mean, they lose, Dre Greenlaw to that Achilles injury. He may not be back probably till the middle point of the season, maybe week 8, week 9. So there's, that concern as well. When he's healthy, dude, he's one of the best linebackers in the league. I mean, that tandem of Warner and Greenlaw, one of the best linebacking tandems in the National Football League. Now, you replace Greenlaw with Devondre Campbell, and that's I don't know if I love that signing more than anything. I think it's one of the more, you didn't improve, you just got worse at that position because Devondre Campbell, well, since he came in 2021 with the Packers, he really hasn't been able to stay healthy for more than a full season. And that's the concern that I have with this is, he comes into San Francisco. Is he going to stay healthy enough to where he could be a linchpin for this team? Now, because when he's healthy, he is a pretty decent linebacker, but it's the big thing is when he's healthy. Because I mean, like, can you get with me on this, or is this you got a different thing?
He's got a real bad case of being old, man. Like he's got a real bad case of being old. You just watch him on the Packers last year, and he's just maybe a step and a half slow at this point in time. Like he's not ancient, right? He's only 31 years old, but he just looks slow out there. And look, Devondre Campbell's going to be the starting will linebacker for the 49ers to start the season, and you hope with Fred Warner there's enough to cover that up. But this is obviously a really, really, really big step down, in my opinion, from Dre Greenlaw if he is going to be lost for 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks to begin the year. And I think that's where like my hate for the 49ers comes in, is that if you squint, you can see this team kind of starting to crack. You can't succeed in the NFL forever. You're not going to have this juggernaut that just rolls on and on and on. There's the Dre Greenlaw injury, and you're trying to cover it up with an old man Devondre Campbell. You have to figure out what you're going to do with Trent Williams. I think it's the next big problem. I think they can get away without Brandon Ayuk, but you have to figure it out with Trent Williams, who continues to hold out at left tackle with his contract dispute. And part of that is because of the style of offense that Kyle Shanahan wants to run. The weak side run game for this offense with Christian McCaffrey is where Kyle Shanahan cashes his checks. You have a huge difference with Trent Williams on one side versus Colton McKivitz at right tackle on the other, who is like serviceable, but not much more than that, particularly compared to Trent Williams, who's maybe the best tackle in the NFL right now. And so when you're able to handle this weak side run game, you either throw George Kittle over onto the right side, who is a good blocker in his own right, but you also lost your second tight end, who is a good blocker as well, who showed up on 30% of the offensive snaps for San Francisco last year, and Charlie Warner, who's now in Atlanta. If you look at how San Francisco lost the Super Bowl last year, it was because on plays where they ran to the right, they averaged 1.5 yards fewer per carry than on plays where they ran to the left. If you don't have Trent Williams out there, this offense just doesn't work the same. Not to mention you lost Eric Armstead in the offseason, right? Like, if you squint, you can see the cracks here, which is why if you're the 49ers, you got to cash in, man. You got to cash in now, or you got to cash in next year. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck paying Brock Purdy, and you're not going to have the Avengers around him to do
it. You use the Avengers reference. That's nice. Yeah. I mean, I forgot that Eric Armstead left the Niners, and which now brings up now, because they have a tough hole in the defense to fill. I mean, they've got Malik Collins and Javon Hargrave kind of filling that inside, and then you replace it. And then on top of that, on the other outside, on the edge, on that other side of the, on the edge spot, you have Leonard Floyd, and you're lining him up opposite side of Nick Bosa. So that, I mean, like,
I think there is some like, we can't replicate Eric Armstead here, but we can replace him in the aggregate. I think we can recreate him in the aggregate. I think there's some money balling here going on. Yeah. That frankly might work, but yeah, it's still a tough loss. And I don't know if anybody can figure it out over there, it's probably John Lynch, but yeah, we'll see.
He can hopefully, he's done it before where he's figured out how to maneuver stuff around. But yeah, I would not be sad if the Niners sucked this year, if they missed the playoffs. That would be the best thing ever. I don't think it's going to happen, but who knows? So jumping away from the Niners, let's go into a love and hate now. We go a little bit more up north in the west side to the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Seattle, they made a couple drastic changes this year. Pete Carroll is gone. They bring in Mike McDonald, and the Seattle Seahawks now have a completely brand new identity potentially for this team. I just want to say my love on this for the Seahawks, Kedrick, is this defensive side is really, really good. I mean, if you look at the players that they have, they're underrated, but they're really good. They've got Leonard Williams. You got Tariq Woolen. You bring in Rayshawn Jenkins from Jacksonville. You have Julian Love that you brought in last year. They have little pieces that could help this team in a way get better as time goes on. They have pieces where they can build in the draft and they can fit in different spots. I think that's a good start for them. What I don't like, and this is kind of my hate, is they do not have a quarterback right now in this offense. Their offense, I think, is it's aging. It's aging in a way. You have Tyler Lockett, who's in his 30s right now. You have an offensive line who they have still not been able to figure out, how do we put this offensive line together? How do we build this offensive line together? They've been doing this since the days of Russell Wilson, back when Russell Wilson was in his prime, when he was in his second, third year with this team, and they're still trying to figure it out. So, and then you got the issue of quarterback. They got Geno Smith. They got Sam Howell. I don't like any one of those two quarterbacks. I mean, I'm a fan of Sam Howell because he did have some very good success at North Carolina. I thought he was going to be a great fit in Washington. It didn't pan out that way in Washington. Now he's in Seattle and he's competing with Geno Smith. I mean, you talk about the quarterback battle in Denver. This is probably the second worst quarterback battle in the NFL.
But everyone told me 2 years ago that Geno Smith is awesome now. Everyone told me that.
I know. And somehow he's not. So Yeah, that's my love and my hate for Seattle. I don't know what your thoughts are for the Seahawks, but they got a lot of work to do on the offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team that finished 12th in defensive DVOA last season. Middling defense that I understand your point that maybe that you can get a little bit more out of it than the staff last year did. And you're right, the quarterback room is rough, and that sucks for my love on the team, which is there's awesome skill talent on offense. DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigma, Kenneth Walker. When it comes to Kenneth Walker at running back, only Breece Hall and Christian McCaffrey broke more tackles last year in the league than Kenneth Walker did. Kenneth Walker had the third best broken tackle rate in the National Football League last year. But despite that, part of the reason Kenneth Walker had to break so many tackles is because the remaining cast around him on the offense is just abysmal when you move outside of the number 1-2 wide receivers, and when you move outside of the running back room, it's just really bad. The biggest drop off in DVOA for any team in the league, from play action passes to true drop back passes, was in Seattle last year. They the biggest drop off in DVOA from play action passes to true dropbacks. This is not an offense that succeeded just dropping back and passing from the pocket last year, and they didn't bring in a quarterback who all of a sudden is going to be a great pocket passer as well. And part of that, the wide receiver skill talent leads to them being yak monsters last year, because this was an offense that couldn't throw the ball down the field. You had Jackson Smith and Jigba playing a ton in the screen game. You had an offensive line which was ranked 26th in stuff rate at the line of scrimmage. So no wonder Kenneth Walker had to break so many tackles. It was the only way he was getting through his offensive line to get a couple of yards. It's hard. And then you go ahead and you lose Damian Lewis on the offensive line, who's now in Carolina. He was the third best pass blocker in the league, who had the third best pressure rate of any guard in the league last season, according to Pro Football Focus, I believe it was. It's rough, man. It's rough for some exciting players on offense who, on a better team, I think could really shine, but are going to be let down by the supporting cast.
Well, and here's where the new head coach comes in too. You got Mike Macdonald. You switch him over from Pete Carroll. This is, I think, the bright spot. I think that could help the Seattle Seahawks team at least not be so bad. But Mike Macdonald, phenomenal job as a defensive coordinator wherever he's been. I mean, you look at it at the University of Michigan, he did a phenomenal job when he went from the University of Michigan all the way back to the Baltimore Ravens, especially with the work he did in Baltimore last year. I think he was only in Baltimore for a season, and transformed that Ravens defense from one of the worst defenses, kind of one of the more middle of the pack defenses, to a team that you look at, they finished number 1 in total defense last year, or excuse me, they finished number 1 by Pro Football Reference in total defense last year. Some teams had them, ranked in the top 10 in total defense, but you look at it as well, they were one of the best defenses in the National Football League by a lot of analysts, by a lot of numbers. And Mike Macdonald, especially when you look at that cast too that they had in the Ravens, they had a pretty good cast. So now trying to take that and trying to build that over in Seattle. And what have we seen from Seattle that has made them a winner in recent years? It's not been the play of their offense. It's been that defensive style. When you had guys like Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Brandon Browner, Cam Chancellor, Bobby Wagner, Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett, Brandon Mebane, you had those pieces on the defensive side that made that team scary. You had pieces on the defensive side that made this team have an identity of just being a hard smash mouth defense. And I think bringing Macdonald back here is what could change this, whole complexion, whole identity of this team. Bringing it back to the original 2013 Legion of Boom kind of identity, where they were hard-nosed, smash-mouth hitting, getting in your face every day, and just beating the living daylights out of you. And Macdonald has that pedigree, and he had that in Baltimore. He can bring that pedigree over to the Seahawks, and that's, I think, something that they need. They needed a culture change. They needed somebody who could come in and could give life to this team. Is it going to be fast right away? Probably not, but you'll start to see changes, I think, this first year of what this identity of this team could look like.
I don't have as big of thoughts on the clear fourth best team in this division, man. That's a lot of words for this team that I think is going to finish last in the division.
Interesting. Well, we jump from, let's go back to the state of California, that great state of California, and we talk about the LA Rams. The Rams, they made the playoffs last year. They almost could have won in Detroit. They lost last year. Their season ended early. And what's tough is while this offense got better, they improved massively. They got a number 2 for this Rams team in Puka Nacua, and they added Blake Corum in the draft. They took a big step back. Aaron Donald retired this last season. That's a lot of production that you lose from Aaron Donald, and a lot of pass rush work that now has to be made up. They got Jared Verse in the draft too, but the Rams kind of took, while they took 2 steps forward, they took 1 massive step back on the defensive side. So love and hate Kedrick. What are your thoughts on this here?
I think this offense is going to be scary potent this year for a team that only had its starting quarterback in Matthew Stafford for 9 games last season before being shut down. They still finished 7th in DVOA. You still have Cooper Kupp, you still have Puka Nacua. You now have Blake Corum as a complement to Kyren Williams in the backfield. You have a solid offensive line that has, I think, quietly gotten just a little bit better each of the last 2 off seasons. This is a team that I think looks really good on the offensive side of the ball. And yeah, you have to replace Aaron Donald on the defensive side. And I think that's probably what I hate the most for this team. I think it's your biggest step back, particularly on a defense that finished 22nd in DVOA. But for a team that has its first round pick in forever, it comes at a really opportune time, and you get probably the best player you could have out of the draft to replace Aaron Donald and Jared Verse out of Florida State, who finished the season with 12.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks. You think that's awesome, but you still have a coverage unit that finished 31st by PFF last year, and losing a Hall of Fame pass rusher on top of that, you hope it doesn't compound that problem. You got some issues on the defensive side of the ball to fix, but I think the offense is good enough to where this might even be a team that can actually challenge San Francisco at the top of the division. I think this is a really exciting LA Rams team that I have kind of had to eat crow on the last couple of years, because I keep expecting Matthew Stafford to get a case of old man quarterback and fall off a cliff, and he just keeps not doing it. Matthew Stafford has impressed me more and more the longer his career has gone on, frankly.
Yeah, and it's been really impressive what Stafford's done. And this is going to be a Rams team this year that I think it's going to be one of those teams where we're going to score 30 even if we give up 30. We're just going to relentlessly score to just kind of make up for the fact our defense kind of sucks. I mean, their secondary really kind of atrocious. You look at it, they got Darius Williams, who may not be ready, Cameron Curl, John Johnson, Tre'Davious White they picked up in free agency. Who knows if even Tre'Davious White is going to be back to his all-pro self. But, I mean, it's tough. How do you replace that? Even with Jared Verse, adding some pass rush help, they don't really have much. I mean, they have Kobe Turner. You got Brandon Fisk, who they picked up, Bobby Brown. I mean, they don't really have a guy now to kind of fill that role in the.
I mean, nobody's going to fill that role.
But yeah,
right?
We're getting a bit over the top. No one's going to replace him.
Yeah, I do want to correct myself real quick. I said Matthew Stafford only played 9 games last season. That was obviously 2 seasons ago, but he dealt with that thumb injury last year. And despite that, despite only playing in 15 games and nursing that thumb injury, he still led a really potent offense to, be one of the best units in the league.
Yeah, and Puka Nacua, like, give like credit. If they, Puka Nacua covers up a whole lot on that offensive side, because I will say after Cup and after Nacua, they do not have really the depth at that wide receiver position. So they've got to make sure that they can be able to get those two on the field as much as possible. And I think they will. Sean McVay's really good at scheming guys in very good situations. So he's got to figure out a way to do that. But man, you can't have those two get off the field. And then improving the running game too. Kyron Williams had a bad year his first year, his rookie year. This last year he came back, really improved. And so what do? They go add Blake Corum. And I think this is going to be a great fit for him because he doesn't have to tote as much of the rock. He was used a ton in Michigan, as Sam Gemini so likes to call the Michigan offense the ground raid. They just basically ran it with Corum relentlessly. Yes. And now they don't have to do that. Now he doesn't have to do that as much. So we could see a very refreshed, refurbished version of Blake Corum for this offense. So I like the Rams in the situation. I do think you're right. I think if there is any team that can compete with the Niners in this division, it's going to be the Rams this year. And it's the only reason is they have the offensive firepower to put up what the Niners are throwing down as well.
Yeah, it should be a fun year. You want to move on to the Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
This is a team that had an abysmal defense last year. Just
abysmal?
God awful terrible. Just the worst. Second worst DPA per drop back in the league last year. Yeah, you have Budda Baker on the team, but you're really, really, really young almost everywhere else. And honestly, I think what I love is that this team went all in trying to fix its secondary. A team that had a bad pass defense has decided we are going to throw spaghetti at the wall. We are going to draft a whole bunch of defensive backs and try to fix it. They're doing the same kind of thing that the Green Bay Packers have done recently at safety, and they're going to try to fix the cornerback room in Arizona. You went in and you drafted Max Melton out of Rutgers. You drafted Elijah Jones in the third round out of Boston College. You drafted Jaden Davis in the seventh round out of Miami, who is a good depth piece with versatility. You took the safety out of Texas Tech, the Darian Taylor. These are fixes that I think should work. I think the Darian Taylor is a really solid safety prospect, a guy with like true center fielder type speed. I think that maybe they don't have the secondary figured out this year right away, but they can get better throughout the season and maybe set themselves up for real success a year from now. I think what I hate is that for a team that is getting Kyler Murray back, I still think you have real questions on the offensive line for this team, and you have to hope that Kyler Murray does not get killed again for like the millionth season in a row. Jonah Williams, you sign him out of Cincy in free agency to be your starting right tackle. And that would have been a huge splash signing like 3 years ago. Yeah. Like last year, he was the 82nd ranked tackle in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. There's an ongoing battle for the starting left guard role. You do have really promising talent in your first round pick from last year in Paris Johnson Jr., a guy I thought was really good, a guy I was kind of hoping the Green Bay Packers would luck into taking in last year's draft. Yeah, there's a lot. I don't know. It's rough scene on the offensive line, which I think is not great for a Cardinals team that needs to keep its quarterback healthy. But if the offensive line gets bowled over and thrown down to the ground, maybe Kyler Murray will actually be able to see over it at that point. I don't know.
You had to throw a height joke in there. Nice. Yeah, this card, I mean, like my love for this Cardinals team, getting Kyler Murray back is going to be super, super beneficial for this team. He didn't play a full season. He came back. I think what was it, the last 7 games of the year,
Something
and
like that.
last 7 games of the year, and played played a little bit better for this team. Now he was coming off an injury. He didn't really go out there and ball like we've seen Murray ball before. But now he's back. He's fully healthy. He's got a new target in Marvin Harrison Jr. And then you also have on the defensive side, you have Budda Baker. But then you look after that, it is. This is a team that I don't think Seattle, I don't think Seattle's going to finish last. I think Arizona could. And it's the only reason is because they have like zero to little depth on this team. I mean, yes, they did fix the secondary. They did add some pieces to the secondary, but they didn't add really any pass rush. I mean, they added zero pass rush this past year. I mean, you drafted Darius Robinson to be probably one of your only other pass rush guys. You still have Zaven Collins, who hasn't really panned out. You have Bilal Nichols, who's okay. Justin Jones, okay. They don't really have a pass rusher from this group. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball. I mean, yeah, their offensive line, terrible last year. They're still trying to rebuild that. Paris Johnson, I think, did a decent job last year. And you're right. If we had the Jonah Williams a few years ago, it would be a great signing. You'd have two incredible tackles at that position. But it's the Jonah Williams of now.
Mm-hmm.
This wide receiving core, very young, it's a hodgepodge group of guys after Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, you have Michael Wilson, you got Zay Jones, Tejon Palmer, Chris Moore, Zach Pascal, Greg Dortch. They just don't have many other solid wide receivers. And then your tight end, Greg McBride, who did have a decent year last year as a rookie, but like they still got a long ways to go to figure out how they're going to get this team back to where they were in 2021 when they won the first 7 games of the season and they were one of the best teams in football.
Green Bay Packers broke them as an organization.
Yeah, essentially. And
on Sunday Night Football for the whole nation to see.
And then you have Jonathan Gannon coming in as head coach, and it's just I don't know if there's a worse fit for the Cardinals than bringing in Jonathan Gannon to this team.
I just don't know if we know what the Arizona Cardinals are at this point, which is the weirdest thing, right? Like over the course of the last 2 seasons, Kyler Murray has barely played one full season, right? Last 2 seasons combined, Kyler Murray has played 19 games. He has not played a complete season since 2020.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know what. And obviously, when Kyler Murray is out there, this is a different team. But like, even in the 11 games that Kyler Murray appeared in 2022, this was a 3-win team. In the 8 games that Kyler Murray appeared in last season, this was a 3-win team. I just don't think we really know what this team is with a full season of Kyler Murray. And in the limited Kyler Murray we've seen the last 2 seasons, despite a lot of the production being there, the roster as a whole has not done enough to complement him and give us everything that we think Kyler Murray is and can be based on his first 3 years in the league. We have not seen the Cardinals be anything close to that in a really long time. And despite all that, despite everything we think Kyler Murray can be, the highest number of wins we've seen Kyler Murray lead a team to is 9 in one season.
Yeah. And that was the 2021 season. So yes. they have a lot of work. And also too, having Cliff Kingsbury as your head coach, I don't think helps as well. And then you go from Cliff Kingsbury to Jonathan Gannon. I mean, like,
yeah,
philosophically, it just doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, I don't know. It's unfair to pin the sheer number of wins at Kyler Murray's feet. He has performed very well. I think is clearly a top 10 quarterback in the league, probably a fringe top 5 guy when fully healthy. But man, it's gotta, if you're a Cardinals fan, it's just gotta be a rough few years here thinking, all right, we think we have something, and then it all falls apart. And yeah, I still don't know what's gonna happen here. Let's move to predicting the division winner real quick. I'm gonna take the 49ers, obviously, but like I don't think it's out of the question that this is a year where the LA Rams sneak up and take this. I just think that the 49ers are more complete on both sides of the ball. I think the 49ers have the better defense than the Rams. So I will take that. But like, if Brock Purdy is not going to be a historical anomaly by efficiency numbers this year again, there's a real world in which like the LA Rams just take 2 games over the 49ers, and that might be enough. It's a small sample size sport.
Yeah. I hate to say this, but I pick the Niners to win this division. It just, the Niners right now have all the pieces that the Rams don't have. They don't have a pass rusher. Their secondary is kind of abysmal. This is a team that also too offensively still has Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. They still have pieces on the offensive side. But I do think, I will say, if there was a team that could give the Niners a run for their money in this division, it is the LA Rams, because it wouldn't surprise me if they if they win those 2 games in the regular season, or if they steal one. I mean, like,
well, let me paint you.
Stealing that division is huge.
Let me paint you a picture of, leading into a little bit of the AFC West preview we're going to get into here. Chris Jones last year, his holdout with the Kansas City Chiefs extended into week 1. He held out that week 1 opener game against the Lions. The Lions ended up winning. Let's say Trent Williams extends his holdout to week 1, right? That's a loss in the column for the 49ers that they weren't necessarily counting on. If he doesn't come back, isn't necessarily in game shape right away, we get 49ers at Rams week 3. That's early. And at this point, if these holdouts are going to continue for San Francisco, I'm excited to get the 49ers early if I'm the Rams, despite needing to figure out what the offense or what the defense is. Maybe your best chance at getting the 49ers and picking off a win is getting them early despite your young defense.
Yeah. This is what the Niners have been the last 3 seasons, except for last year. Whereas they start off slow and then they kind of gradually pick up towards the end of the season. Mm-hmm. This is a great opportunity for them to try and get the Niners early. And if they do, I mean, because week 3 is a big week. If you can get a division opponent in week 3 early in the season, that is a big step up in your division until the next time you have to play them, which probably won't be until later in the season.
Yeah. And I mean, the Rams have a really interesting scheduling quirk too, where they open the season at the Lions, then play at the Cardinals, and then host the 49ers. Those are like potential 3 big games to start your year right off the bat. So I don't know, should be fun ball as always in the NFC West.
Fun balls. Love it. All right. Let's jump to the AFC West. Let's talk about the Raiders. And the Raiders, man, I say this lightly. They are in football hell right now. Anybody who goes to play for the Raiders right now has no chance of going to see a Super Bowl anytime in their future. No chance to go to a playoff game anytime in the future, simply because of Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels sucked. That team sucked. I don't know how that team was so bad and how they sucked, but they sucked. They move on from Josh McDaniels. They get Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce, down the stretch of the season, played pretty well, down the stretch of the season as a coach, did really well. Got himself a nice, shiny head coaching job. They took that interim tag off, and now he is their head coach. I love that for the Raiders, their defense could be the backbone of this team. and I know that's a lot to say, and I think that's a bit of a reach, but the Raiders have, at least you look at it from last year, they were 15th in total defense last year. They were an okay team, middle of the pack. But you look at it when Antonio Pierce came in, they were at one point one of the top defenses through the last 7 weeks of the season. They were, in the top 5 in the last 7 weeks of the season. Antonio Pierce now comes in. This Raiders team gets a new revamped defense with his identity, his style of play, and they added Christian Wilkins. They paid the bag for Christian Wilkins this past year to pair along with Max Crosby. You have Robert Spillane, who had a really good year last year for the Raiders, who had a just emerging, superstar year to go with that. And I think this Raiders team defensively could surprise some people. I don't think they'll give up, as many points as they did last year in a couple games, but they'll surprise a couple people in this division and maybe steal a game or two. They stole a game last year in Kansas City on the holidays to beat the Chiefs with this defense. So I'm just saying the Raiders defense could be something. Now, the hate part, and this is like the most obvious thing, is this Raiders team offensively sucks donkey balls. They are just terrible on the offensive side of the ball. Even with Devontae Adams, you lose Josh Jacobs, and you don't really have another guy to replace him. I mean, Zamir White maybe could be a solid replacement, but they have issues on the offensive line. They have, issues at the quarterback position, and this wide receiving core really is the only bright spot of this team. Other than that, this team just sucks on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, the signing of Christian Wilkins is nice. Him lining up alongside Max Crosby will make hay for a defense that already finished 8th in DVOA last season. Why did this team? I mean, maybe the Raiders did make calls and tried to draft a quarterback. I don't think we've seen any reporting that indicates so. By the time that they drafted, all the guys who went in the first round were already off the board. But they it
suck.
just sucks for a team that I think is going to be bad this year. Look, at the very least, like Gardner Minshew led the Colts last year, and that was not a terrible offense. So you think maybe he can cobble this Raiders offense together again? I don't know, but like even if you're not going to draft a quarterback, why the hell are you drafting a tight end in the first round?
Yeah.
First round tight ends are one of the positions that have the worst track record in the league. We are really, really, really bad at predicting who is going to be good tight ends in the league. So using a first round pick on a tight end is typically a bad return on investment. I like Brock Bowers as much as the next guy, but like, he might be bad. Like, I don't know. Sometimes shit happens. Players who are great in college don't pan out in the NFL all the time. I don't know what you're doing there. Yeah, if you're a Raiders fan, I feel sorry for you because I don't. This is not a team that I have a lot of hope for in the next 5 years.
No, and it's because they do this every year with the Raiders. It's been going back since Al Davis, after the Tuck Rule game. Just even to say that, even after the Tuck Rule game, they've been kind of on this snowballing spiral for so many years. They burned through multiple head coaches, multiple quarterbacks, trying to find that Raider gleam, trying to find someone who can carry the torch. If any Raiders fans get that reference, or light the torch, I mean, but still, they haven't found it. They have not found it, and I just, oh God, I just wish that this Raiders team would be good because it makes better NFL. It makes the NFL a lot better when the Raiders are good. I mean, like back in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s, they were one of like the like top franchises in the National Football League, and seeing them now, it's just like, dude, they are terrible. Like their stadium is nice, but they are so bad to watch every Sunday. So, moving forward from the Raiders, now we jump to a team that is kind of interesting. They could be last. They could also be second in this division. The LA Chargers. The Chargers, I think, had one of the best off seasons of all because simply they got John Harbaugh, and John Harbaugh
they got Jim Harbaugh.
Excuse me, Jim Harbaugh. Thank you. They got Jim Harbaugh, and they already got a quarterback that can lead this team to the promised land for the Chargers. I'm talking about Justin Herbert, John H. JH. And Justin Herbert, for this Chargers team, looks like he could be ready week 1, but even still, this Chargers team could be really good just because they have Jim Harbaugh there. And he could make magic with Justin Herbert. Now, that's my love. What I hate about this, Kedrick, is this Chargers team doesn't really have any other pieces besides that. I mean, they lost. You look at it, they lose Keenan Allen, they lose Mike Williams, you lose two of your number one, you lose your number one and your number 2 wide receiver. Austin Eckler's gone. They bring in the Baltimore Ravens backfield basically by bringing in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins from a year ago. And you had Ladd McConkey and DJ Chark, and Josh Palmer is your number 1 right now. So that's pretty much it. And then on the defensive side, who knows what they have. I mean, Joey Bosa is the only, or let me phrase that, Joey Bosa and Derwin James are the only 2 other pieces on that defense that could make this Chargers team watchable. But if there is one coach that has been known for fast turnarounds of teams, it's Jim Harbaugh, dude. I mean, you look at the Niners when he was with San Francisco, 3 straight NFC championship games. That is pretty dang impressive. And I don't think could get the Chargers to that standard, but could make it very hard for the Chiefs this year to try and retake that division title this year in the AFC West.
Yeah, and I don't think that they could have had a more Jim Harbaugh-ass kind of a draft too, right? Like your first round pick at number 5 is Joe Alt, who just screams, Jim Harbaugh, drink your milk. We're gonna put the beef up front and
the ground raid, baby.
Tackle. Yeah,
the ground raid.
Ladd McConkey, who for being a Georgia wide receiver is the most Jim Harbaugh type at wide receiver. I think you could grab, and then your 3rd round pick is Junior Colson out of Michigan, like one of the 2 players that this team drafted out of Michigan. This team is very quickly being made in Jim Harbaugh's image. I think that you can be really excited about that really quickly. And despite the holes on the team, there's an opportunity here, because if you look at Vegas win totals, the Chargers have the 2nd easiest strength of schedule in the league this year. Noah, who has the easiest strength of schedule in the league?
That would be your Chicago Bears.
Nope, wrong. They are 3rd.
Oh, they're 3rd. Who is number 1? Panthers?
Come on. How could it be the Panthers? They don't get to play the Panthers.
The Chargers. Who else am I thinking of? I'm blanking on this question.
You're in the right division.
Oh, the Falcons?
Yes, obviously, because the Falcons get to play the other teams in the NFC South twice.
That's right.
Yes. So the Chargers get that, as well as getting to the AFC South teams get to play the AFC West teams get to play the NFC South teams this year. So big part has to do with that. So there's an opportunity here for the Chargers to capitalize, even if they don't have a perfect roster. this season, and their holes that you mentioned are kind of the holes that come to mind for me already. But when you have a quarterback, it makes building the rest of the team pretty easy. You got rid of some of the old aging pieces, like Keenan Allen at wide receiver. You're giving yourself a chance to move forward. Maybe this is a transition year for the Chargers, but they should be ready to compete for this division pretty much right away, man. They are sitting there and could be sneaky AFC West contenders now, and I think it should be an AFC contender for the conference by next season.
Mm-hmm. And the big thing about that team too with Jim Harbaugh is they got the quarterback, and that's huge for like Jim Harbaugh in terms of getting this team off and running, because we saw it when he had a quarterback in San Francisco. That team was off and running right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is going to be relatively a quick fix, but yeah. The ground raid's coming to LA, baby. So Charger fans, get ready to watch your team pound the rock relentlessly. Now we jump from the Chargers. Let's go to the Mile High City, the Denver Broncos. I watched the Packers and the Broncos. That game was completely unwatchable because Green Bay only got 2 points out of that.
Nobody gives a damn about your preseason shenanigans for a game in which there were not double-digit players who will see double-digit snaps this year for the Packers. Seriously.
But the Broncos, year 2, Sean Payton, this quarterback battle is just it's rough to look at. You know, since Peyton Manning retired, they've had more quarterbacks start for the Denver Broncos than any team in the National Football League. And yeah, what can we make from the Denver Broncos? There's nothing really for me to say other than the fact their uniforms look cool. I mean,
no, stop. That's a loser ass take, man. It is a loser ass take.
Other than that, there isn't really.
No.
You
don't get to like
if with the Broncos.
If you are a team who's trying to show off new uniforms and you're doing it in the preseason, you're a freaking loser, man. An absolute loser. God.
Well, then convince me. Convince me. What do you think about this Broncos team?
They jettisoned Russell Wilson, which is probably the best thing they could have possibly done for their organization.
That's fair.
Seriously. I do not claim him, by the way.
We do not claim him.
Yeah, correct. He's all yours, Wolfpack. Yeah, he look, they jettisoned Russell Wilson, which is clearly what they needed to do. I know that Saints fans really want to say that Sean Payton is washed, or at least I've seen that from a couple of Saints fans, but the internet's not a real place. I think Sean Payton will probably turn this team around slowly but surely. Yeah, last year they finished 3rd place in the AFC West, but that was the first time Sean Payton has finished 3rd in a division since 2016. Like and yeah, a lot of that was because he was playing in the NFC South, and sometimes there was not the best talent in the NFC South, but also sometimes you had Matt Ryan in the NFC South, and you had Cam Newton, and you were still winning that division 4 years in a row from 2017 to 2020. I think Sean Payton will get this figured out. The hardest part for this team, despite the fact that I think you at least have a guy who can push the right buttons in Bo Nix there, and maybe that's the model that you're going for, is trying to replicate a Brock Purdy, a guy who maybe doesn't have huge physical tools in Bo Nix, but a guy who is mature and can handle running and executing an offense. I think you might have that in Bo Nix now. The hard part is that you have one of the most difficult schedules in the National Football League moving forward, ranked 25th from easiest to most difficult in strength of schedule. So the seventh most difficult schedule in the league by Vegas win totals. Might be a little bit of a rough year. on the wins and losses side, despite maybe being a better team. But like this team didn't finish terribly last year, right? They were what, an 8-9 or 9-8.
They got blown out by 70. They got 70 scored on them.
It doesn't matter. They won 8 games.
How bad.
They won 8 games, which like in a different year would have been good enough to get them to the playoffs.
Yes.
Which is insane. Like we know this is not necessarily a playoff caliber roster. But when you put fucking everybody into the playoffs anyway, like who cares? For those who don't know, playoff creep is one of the things I hate most about American sports. So yeah, I don't know. They might be a little bit better this year from an on the field perspective, but not win as many games. And I think Sean Payton will still has a chance to turn this thing around. You have Jim Leonard over there, so anything's possible.
Yeah, that's true. Now we can claim that. We can both claim
we
that.
Absolutely claim the hell out of Jim Leonard.
We can both claim that. Yeah. So nothing wrong with that. The Kansas City Chiefs, we go to close out this episode. We close it out with the defending back-to-back Super Bowl champion, the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the first time since 2003, 2004 that a team has repeated as back-to-back winners in the Super Bowl. Tom Brady did it last in the 2003, 2004 team. The Chiefs did it last year in 2022, or not last year, did this in last year in 2023 and the year before in 2022. They do it in actually incredible fashion. They win in overtime against the 49ers. And the Chiefs, all I can say about this is for one of my big loves, and surprisingly, it's not Patrick Mahomes, because that would be the easy way out. But this wide receiving core got a lot better. I think way better than last year. And that's not saying much because you look at it, MBS is gone. Kadarius Toney is somewhere still there, but
that's a great question. Yeah. Is he still on that team?
I don't know if he's still on that roster, but if
he is
not, he is. Okay, so Kadarius Toney still on that roster, probably won't get as much playing time this year, but this wide receiving core has really improved because Rashid Rice coming back, Marquise Brown they added in free agency, Xavier Worthy, who they added in the draft, they stole from Buffalo, so they got their Tyreek Hill back in Xavier Worthy. And I really think this offense for Mahomes, he got better weapons to give this team a little bit more of a down the field threat. They didn't have that last year. They at one point led the league in drops. But what was crazy also about that was Mahomes had one of the highest completion percentages he's ever had in his career. To think about that. So
all with Kadarius Toney, who is, I guess, on the fringe of getting cut on this roster and committed 2 penalties on 1 snap during a preseason game last week.
It's just, I would love to hear Sam Jabidi's take on Kadarius Toney. It would be hilarious, but
we'll have to invite him back if he gets cut from the Chiefs.
We should. But yeah, this Chiefs team offensively got better. Defensively, however, this secondary looks just brutal. They lose L'Jarius Sneed, and you lose L'Jarius Sneed, and their depth is just, their depth is pretty bad. They Trent McDuffie, you got Trent McDuffie on one side, Joshua Williams on the other side. Your nickelback is Chamari Connor. This secondary looks horrible. And then you look at the safeties, you have Reed and Cook as your 2 other safeties, but after that, their cornerback position just looks horrible. And L'Jarius Sneed, I think, covered a lot of that depth up. But now that he's gone, this is not going to be a good year for teams, or specifically for the Chiefs, if they're trying to look for their secondary to try and stop people down the field in the passing game.
Yeah, losing L'Jarius Sneed was going to be my hate before I saw that you threw in the doc that it was going to be yours. So I had to shift a little bit, but I will go with my love first of all, which is that they brought back Chris Jones. I'm glad that they figured out how to do that. I know that was a big question heading into the offseason if they were going to be able to re-sign him, make it work on this team. I'm glad that they did. He's going to end up retiring a Kansas City Chief, and he is the engine that makes that unit work on the defensive line. He is a monster despite his age, and I am excited to see him continue to ball out for Kansas City. My hate is that they continue to shuffle guys at the tackle spots on the offensive line. They have not had the same tackle pairing for a few years now on the O line, and it just makes you wonder when something is going to go haywire back there in the pocket for Patrick Mahomes. And look, Jawan Taylor still remains entrenched on the right side. His second season in a row being that right tackle starter. But clearly they were not blown away with Wanya Morris, who stepped in at left tackle for the injured Donovan Smith last year, who originally came over to Kansas City on the 1-year deal after protecting Tom Brady's blind side in Tampa Bay. Now it's either going to be Wanya Morris or Kingsley Sumataya out of BYU, that late second rounder. And look, when your options are either a guy that you don't love at left tackle already or a late second round rookie, it makes me nervous as if I were a Chiefs fan about protecting Patrick Mahomes on the line there. I think that could be a potential recipe for disaster. And overall, between the secondary, maybe questions at offensive line, this is probably the most gettable Chiefs team we've seen in a few years. And I know Jack Goods and I talked about this last week during the AFC East preview. It's interesting that for as gettable as the Chiefs are, they still have Patrick Mahomes. So really, how gettable can they be? And some of these other perennial AFC contenders are also in kind of a tough spot. The Buffalo Bills are in having to hit a soft reset on their roster after being whatever it was, $20 million over the cap heading into the offseason. Nobody else in the AFC West is really set to contend with the Chiefs. Maybe you get a push from the Chargers, but for as hard as it is to say, with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, this being a little bit of potentially a down year, putting into the context of Patrick Mahomes, like still a down year, potentially, whatever that means for the Chiefs, I still don't think anybody in the division is really going to push them. It just might mean a little bit more of a wide open race in the AFC West. I don't know. I'm interested to find out what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I mean, the Chiefs right now are kind of the front runner for this division, which we jump into it right now. I mean, like for division winners, I honestly think the Chiefs are going to win this division. I think the Chargers will make it interesting, but Kansas City, I think right now is so much better than the Chargers right now. And San Diego kind of right now is kind of on a soft rebuild because you have Jim Harbaugh. They're on a soft reset. And it may take them a year before I think we really start to see this Chargers team finally competing with the Chiefs. I just don't think that they have the pieces yet to compete with Kansas City. I think Kansas City right now, one of the best teams in that division, and they're one of the best teams in the NFL year in and year out. And I think they're going to win the division in the AFC West yet again.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the bigger question here is do any of the teams that we're going to talk about next week on the show in the AFC North, do they have something to say about the Chiefs getting to another Super Bowl?
It is true. And yeah, that does it for us here today on STP, on Snap the Pigskin. Kedrick, actually, I got to say, we've gone through all these last few shows. It's been so fun covering the division, and I cannot wait because we are less than 3 weeks away from the NFL season, and I just simply can't wait. And next week, we got the AFC North and the NFC North, so we finally get to talk a little bit more about maybe the top 2 divisions this year. I really like the NFC North this year. I've been very high on the NFC North because of the moves that they've made. Same with the AFC North. I mean, the AFC North too, right now, that's a dogfight of a division every single year. So
yeah, if you're just stacking teams by or if you're just stacking division odds for an AFC North team to reach the Super Bowl, an NFC North team to reach the Super Bowl, versus an AFC West team to reach the Super Bowl, whatever. If you're just stacking division odds, I think it is, if you take the teams in the aggregate, I think the AFC North and the NFC North have the best Vegas odds to have their respective divisions represented in the Super Bowl this year. So could be an interesting kind of a preview next week, just because there are more realistic contenders out of there, even though I think this week has the highest top end contenders between the Chiefs and the 49ers. I think we see more potential volume of contenders next week when we're talking about the Ravens, we're talking about the Bengals, we're talking about the Lions, we're talking about the Packers. Should be a fun week.
Yes, the black and blue division, baby. I cannot wait for next week. So that is it for us. But if you want to listen and watch me or Kedrick's beautiful little face on this great show, you can follow us and give us a like and subscribe on our channel on YouTube at youtube.com/snapthepigskin. You can also listen to us as well on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, etc., etc. And feel free to give a listen. You can also feel free to give a listen to Kedrick's podcast as well, the Sconnie Six Pack. We'll drop his link for his channel down below, as well as giving him a follow on the app formerly known as Twitter, and also giving me a follow as well on the app formerly known as Twitter. You don't have to do it. It's okay. I respect it. But thanks for all of you that have been listening today. This has been another edition of Snap the Pigskin.